They VOTDMY daughter out. A VOICOVER script. I came home at 11:03 in the morning after a grueling double shift at the hospital, still wearing my work shoes, keys dangling in my hand. My body so exhausted that my bones felt like they had been borrowed from someone else and never quite returned. All I wanted was 2, maybe 3 hours of sleep, and then the entire afternoon with my 7-year-old daughter, Cora, bedtime together. That was the plan I had been holding on to all night long, like a small, warm light at the end of a very dark tunnel. I stepped through the front door, and something immediately felt wrong. The house smelled like fresh coffee and maple syrup, and I could already hear my mother's voice, that particular bright, performative tone she reserves for moments when she is about to sell you something you never agreed to buy. There was laughter coming from deeper inside the house, the kind of busy, energetic noise that only ever fills these walls when someone wants something from me. Then I saw my sister Allison in the hallway, walking in her socks and hauling flattened cardboard boxes like she was staging a moving sale. A ring light box, already opened, was propped against the wall beside her. She looked up at me and offered a tight-lipped smile, the kind that does not reach the eyes, and said, "Oh, you're home," as though I were the one interrupting something important. I did not smile back. I did not say hello. I did not ask about the boxes. I simply walked past her, straight to Cora's room, because I am a mother, not a guest in my own house. I pushed open the door and stopped so suddenly that my shoulder hit the door frame. The room looked like it had been struck by a very polite tornado. Cora's bed had been stripped down to the bare mattress. Her blanket, the one she has slept with every single night of her life and absolutely refuses to be without, had been folded up and shoved into a laundry basket like it was an inconvenience. Her stuffed bunny sat upright on the dresser, turned to face the wall as though it had been punished. The rug was half rolled up. The walls were bare in patches where her drawings and little posters used to hang. There was painter's tape along the baseboards, a measuring tape stretched across the floor, and on the desk sat a neat stack of printed inspiration photos, all beige, all white, all aggressively adult. This was not cleaning. This was not organizing. This was repurposing. This was someone deciding that my child no longer lived here and that her room was therefore available. My throat tightened. I turned in a slow circle, half expecting Cora to pop out from behind the closet door. The closet was open. Her backpack was gone. My hands went cold. I stepped back into the hallway. Allison was leaning against the wall, all practiced innocence. "Where is she?" I asked. She blinked at me. "Where's who?" My voice stayed even. "Where is my daughter?" Before Allison could answer, my mother's voice floated in from the kitchen, bright and warm, like she was offering me pancakes. "Oh, honey, come in here." I did not move. "Where is Cora?" I repeated. Footsteps. Then my mother appeared at the end of the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel the way people do in commercials about happy families. My father stood behind her, arms already crossed. Allison shifted beside me and suddenly found her fingernails very interesting. "We voted," my mother said, lifting her chin slightly. I stared at her. "You what?" "We voted. You don't get a say." The world went quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind where someone has turned down the volume on everything except your own heartbeat. I repeated the words slowly because my brain physically refused to process them at normal speed. "You voted about my child." My mother's expression hardened. "You're never here, Hannah. You work all the time." My father added, "It's been discussed." And Allison, with the casual confidence of someone reading a weather report, said, "She's with her dad." The air in my chest vanished. Stephen, my daughter's biological father, a man who had held her exactly once, briefly, awkwardly, like she was something fragile and unfamiliar, and then slowly faded out of her life like a radio signal driving out of range. He showed up a few times a year to say, "Hey, kiddo," take a photo as proof of existence, and disappear again. Cora was 7 years old and barely knew him. "He's still her father," my dad said. "Biologically," I replied, and my voice carried the dangerous, controlled calm of someone holding something extremely heavy and trying not to drop it. My mother sighed as though I were exhausting her. You don't have the outside perspective, you're too close to it. I'm her mother, I said. That is the perspective. And then Allison stepped forward and said it plainly, pointing down the hallway like a real estate agent presenting a property. Besides, we need that room. I work from home now. I need an office, a studio. You can't film content with a child running around. I looked from her to my mother. You are turning my daughter's room into a content studio, my mother said. We can't have a child here disrupting the house, my father said. And you can't take care of her properly anyway, so why are you surprised? Something cold and clear settled inside me then. Not anger yet. Something sharper than anger. Something that had been building for years and had finally found its shape. I turned and walked to the bathroom. Not because I was running away. Because if I stayed in that hallway one more second, I was going to say something that would burn the house down, and I needed that fire later when it would actually matter. I locked the door. I stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror. Work-worn face, tired eyes, the look of a woman who has spent years being reasonable with people who had no intention of being reasonable back. I breathed in, out, in, out. Then I unlocked the door, stepped back into the hallway and faced them. They were still justifying themselves, still talking in overlapping voices, still acting as though they were a committee with jurisdiction over my life. I walked toward them, calm and steady and completely different from the version of myself they had spent decades teaching me to be, the one who absorbed whatever was handed to her and called it family. I looked at all three of them and I said, quietly and clearly, I want you out of my house within 30 days, all of you. The hallway went completely still. I could hear the refrigerator humming. My mother blinked at me like I had announced I was moving to another planet. My father's mouth opened and closed once. Allison's confident little smile shattered into pieces right in front of me. What do you mean? My mother snapped. What are you talking about? My father demanded, as though raising his volume could somehow rewrite what had just happened. I did not answer. I did not argue. I walked to my room, picked up my work bag, my phone, and my keys. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and took out the folder I had been avoiding for years, the one with all the paperwork, the one that proved what they had always called just a formality. Because here is what they had conveniently forgotten, or perhaps hoped I would forget. The house was mine, legally, fully, entirely mine. It had started 2 years earlier, when I mentioned, casually, thinking out loud more than anything, that I had been offered a promotion at work. Better pay, real career advancement, the kind of opportunity that does not come twice. The catch was the schedule. Brutal hours, frequent doubles, the kind of demanding position that works beautifully on paper and destroys your personal life in practice if you do not have genuine support. My first instinct had been to decline, but the moment my parents heard about it, something shifted in them with remarkable speed. Because they were drowning. About $68,000 in unsecured debt. Nearly $19,000 behind on the mortgage and property taxes. Their credit was destroyed. They could not refinance. They could not borrow. And my stable, better-paying new salary, that was their lifeline. Suddenly, my mother was enthusiastic about Cora. Suddenly, they were offering to provide full-time childcare. Suddenly, it was a one-time opportunity and I would be foolish to walk away from it. My father nodded. Allison, who was also still living at home as an adult, said it was obvious. They sat me down and told me they needed me to sign some paperwork, take on a loan in my name, and tossed out casually, as though it were a minor detail, have the house transferred into my name. Just for the paperwork, my mother said, just a formality. I did not fully trust it. I could feel the wrongness of it, a persistent itch beneath the surface. But I also could not watch them lose the house, and I genuinely wanted to believe the rest of it was real. The childcare, the warmth toward Cora, the sudden enthusiasm for being a family. So I said yes. I put in approximately $24,000 of my own savings up front. I took on a monthly payment of around $2,350 in my name. I signed what they put in front of me. The house transferred into my name, and they called it a formality. At first, the arrangement held. They did childcare. I worked. Cora adjusted. Then the financial crisis passed. The paperwork cleared. The house was safe. And everything changed. Suddenly, I was dumping my child on them. Suddenly, my career was a selfish choice. Suddenly, Cora was too noisy, too present, too inconvenient. Allison began complaining about needing more space, more quiet, more room for her content creation and her home studio ambitions. And my parents backed her, as they always had, because that was the pattern I had grown up inside without ever being able to name it clearly until now. I pushed the thought away and focused on what mattered. I slid the folder into my bag, walked back out through the hallway past their voices, demanding, panicking, insisting I had no right, and walked out the front door without a scene, without a monologue, without looking back. Just a clean exit. Behind me, I could hear the sudden scramble, the shift from smug certainty to panicked calculation. In the car, my hands were steady. My heart was not. I called Stephen. No answer. I called again. Nothing. So I called his mother, Susan. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was flat and cold, like she had been waiting. "Hannah," she said. "Do you know where Cora is?" I asked, trying to keep my own voice from cracking. "My parents say she's with Stephen, but he isn't answering. Is she okay?" "She will stay with us," Susan said, "and you are not getting her back." Then she hung up. I turned the car around so fast the tires chirped. I drove to Susan and David's house with my jaw clenched hard enough to hurt, knocked like I was trying to knock the dishonesty right out of the door. And when Susan answered, holding it open just a few inches, the kind of inches that say I can shut this immediately, I did not bother with pleasantries. "Where's Cora?" Susan looked me over. Scrubs, messy hair, someone running on empty. She did not soften. If anything, she looked more certain. "She's here," she said, and then, "You're not getting her back." I held up my phone, the screen showing the stack of unanswered calls to Stephen, the call to Susan, the timestamps, the whole chronology laid bare. "Ask Cora what she was told," I said. Susan's jaw tightened. Her husband, David, standing behind her in the hallway, looked at the screen briefly. Then he asked, quietly, "Was she upset when she arrived?" Susan answered before she could stop herself. "Yes." "Then you already know something is wrong," I said. A long pause, then David shifted just enough to open the doorway. "Come in," he said. And there she was, Cora, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup held in both hands, shoulders hunched, making herself as small as possible, staring at the tabletop like it was the only stable thing in a world that had tilted off its axis. I crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Hi, baby." Her eyes came up to mine and she just stared, waiting to see if I was real. I wrapped my arms around her. She didn't hug me back at first. She stayed stiff, arms at her sides, like she was afraid to trust the moment. Then her voice came out, small and broken. "Grandma said you didn't want me." My throat closed. I could not breathe for a full second. "She lied," I said. My voice shook on the word. Cora's lip trembled. "She said you told them. She said you were tired of me." "I came home," I said carefully, slowly, like my words were the only thing holding her together right now. "I came home and you weren't there, and I drove as fast as I could to find you. I was looking forward to spending the whole day with you." Cora searched my face. "You didn't tell them to bring me here," she whispered. "You didn't tell them that because you don't want me." "Never," I said, and my voice broke on the word. "Not in a million years." Her shoulders dropped. Slowly, cautiously, but real, her arms lifted and wrapped around me. I held her like the world had already proven it could not be trusted, and I was the only thing between her and it. David cleared his throat behind us. Susan said stiffly, "We thought you didn't want her." I did not look up. "I do," David added in a lower, more measured voice. "We don't approve of Stephen, we never have. And when we believed a child was being handed over like she was unwanted, we were willing to take her in without hesitation." Susan nodded once, still rigid. "We weren't going to let her be passed around." I absorbed that, not as trust, not as relief, just as information. A crack in the wall placed exactly where it belonged. Exactly when it needed to be. I stood up, keeping my hand on Cora's shoulder. "I'm taking her home." Susan did not argue. David did not block the door. They watched us leave. In the car, Cora held my hand so tightly it hurt. I let it hurt, because it meant she was there. I did not take her back to the house that night. Instead, I drove us to a hotel, beige walls, neutral carpet, the kind of place specifically designed to be emotionally forgettable, and it was perfect. Cora climbed onto the bed with her shoes still on and stared at the television without turning it on. I sat beside her and exhaled. "New plan," I said. She looked at me. "Are we safe?" The question hit like a punch. I reached for her hand. "Yes," I said. "We're safe." Then I did what I always do when everything is falling apart. I started handling it. I called work and told my charge nurse it was a family emergency. She told me to take whatever time I needed. I turned to my daughter, my exhausted, confused, heartbroken 7-year-old, and I gave her food, a bath, clean pajamas, a warm drink, and her favorite television show. I put my hand on her back while she tried to fall asleep. I did not pour my anger onto her. I did not hand her the weight of adult fear. I just kept saying the same things, over and over, until she believed them. "You're with me. I've got you. No one gets to move you around." She fell asleep curled against my side, like she was afraid that if she let go, I would disappear. When her breathing had steadied, I checked my phone. Missed calls from my mother, my father, Allison. Texts full of accusations, confusion, and demands, as though I owed them an explanation for responding to the situation they had created. I did not respond. Instead, the very next morning, I called a law firm and scheduled a consultation. I sat across from Mr. Brown in his office, slid the folder of documents across his desk, and watched his face as he reviewed what I had signed 2 years earlier. He looked up and said, simply and clearly, "The house is legally yours. You can absolutely evict them. I'll send the papers and begin the process." I nodded once. "Do it." 2 days later, Cora was back in school. Not magically healed, not instantly fine, but back in routine, which is what children need. And I was back at the hospital, trying to work like my personal life was not currently a controlled demolition. I was near the nurse's station when I heard my name, not in a colleague's voice, a demanding voice. I turned and there they were. My mother and father marching through the hospital corridors with the eviction papers in hand, faces flushed, voices already climbing. Patients were looking. Staff was stiffening. A security guard was already paying attention. I stepped forward before it became a full scene. 5 minutes, I said. That's all you get. I led them to a side corridor, visible to staff, private enough to contain the damage, and faced them. My father shoved the papers toward me. My mother's voice climbed to a pitch I had not heard since childhood. They used words like betrayal. They used words like scam. My father said I had stolen their house. My mother said I had used a loophole, that I had planned it all along. I kept my voice flat and even, the kind of calm I use when someone is bleeding and I need my hands to be steady. "You begged me to do it," I said. I reminded them of the debt. I reminded them of the mortgage arrears. I reminded them of my $24,000 in savings, my monthly payments, my credit rating placed on the line at their request. I told them, "I put my future on the line for you. Everything that happened after that was a choice you made." My mother flinched. "We made the difficult decision for you," she said. "You made it for yourselves," I replied. "For Allison's studio, for your comfort, for control." Then I said the clearest thing I have ever said to them in my entire life. "You stopped being my parents the moment you voted my daughter out. You will not have access to Cora. Not now, not ever." Their voices rose again, accusations, panic, the familiar scramble of people who have never faced real consequences before. I took one step back and nodded to the security guard. "I'm done," I said. "You've had your 5 minutes." They were escorted out, still shouting, still trying to pull me back into the old version of myself, the one who absorbed, accommodated, and called it love. But that version of me had left the building. A month later, they were gone. My mother, my father, and Allison actually gone. Not temporarily, not dramatically stormed out and then returned. Gone. I took a new position at a clinic in the next town over. Part-time hours, stable schedule, the kind of work-life balance that fits motherhood without burning it down. The house held too many memories for us to live in comfortably, so I rented it out at $2,850 a month. enough to live well on part-time nursing income, cover occasional childcare, and breathe properly for the first time in years. My finances, without 3 adults quietly draining them, recovered faster than I expected. I went fully no contact, no calls, no texts, no just checking in. I heard through extended family that the 3 of them were now sharing a 2-bedroom rental, Allison still at home, still running her influencer hobby from her bedroom, still living off my parents' pension as though it were a career plan. Cora recovered, not in a straight line, not overnight, but slowly and genuinely. She started sleeping through the night again. She started laughing without checking my expression first to see if it was allowed. She started trusting that home meant me, and that me meant safe. And the thing I did not expect, I stayed in contact with Susan and David. They never excused Stephen. They never defended him. But they showed up for Cora quietly, consistently, every single week, and she genuinely enjoys seeing them. It turns out that sometimes people you had every reason to distrust become the steadiest thing in the room because they chose to be. So here is what I know now, standing on the other side of all of it. I did not steal anything. I rescued my daughter, protected my finances, and reclaimed a life that had been slowly dismantled by people who mistook my patience for permission. They thought they could vote my daughter out of her own home. What they did not account for was that the home was mine, and so was the vote.